I just realized I'm the forgotten genius behind someone else's billion-dollar empire. Not only was my wife planning to divorce me for this tech mogul who built everything from scratch, but she was ready to take half of what I owned to start. Fresh with him, after discovering the truth, I've awakened. Right now, my wife Corinna is standing in our kitchen, suitcase in hand, declaring with complete certainty, Alaric's company is the future. You're just ... stuck in the past. I look at her calmly and reply, you're absolutely right. His future is about to get very interesting. Then I pull out a folder containing 47 patent documents, every single one that built Alaric supposedly. Revolutionary empire, and wave them casually under her shocked gaze. Oh, and Corinna. Tell Alaric that Kaelen Dravik sends his regards. He'll understand what that means. Finally, the woman who threw away 15 years of marriage for a mirage is about to discover what her husband actually built. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The conference room at Nexus Innovation Labs fell silent as Corinna's laugh echoed through the glass walls. I looked up from my research notes to see her standing with the visiting delegation, her hand resting on Alaric Vainrose's arm as he gestured toward the prototype displays. For the third time this month, my wife had found an excuse to attend our quarterly investor presentations. Kaelen, you're not paying attention again, she said. That evening, as we sat in our Millbrook Heights home, the city lights twinkling through our floor-to-ceiling windows, she was scrolling through her phone, barely glancing up. I was asking about the Henderson account. I set down my technical journal and looked at her. 15 years of marriage, and lately it felt like we were roommates who happened to share a mortgage. The Henderson project is moving to phase 2. The neural interface patents we filed last year are finally paying off. That's nice, she replied, her tone suggesting it was anything but. Her phone buzzed, and a smile I hadn't seen in months lit up her face. Oh, Alaric wants to grab coffee tomorrow. He's interested in discussing some collaboration opportunities.
Alaric.
Vainrose, CEO of Quantum Dynamics, the tech darling that had seemingly appeared overnight 3 years ago. His company had revolutionized everything from smart home systems to medical devices, earning him a spot on Forbes 40 Under 40 and a net worth that made our comfortable lifestyle look modest. The tech world called him a visionary, a modern day Edison who saw connections others missed. Collaboration with what exactly? I asked, though part of me already suspected the answer had nothing to do with business. He thinks there might be synergies between quantum dynamics and some of the technologies coming out of Nexus Labs. You know, cross-licensing opportunities, joint ventures. She finally looked up from her phone. It's incredibly forward-thinking. Kaelen, not like the academics you usually work with. There it was. The subtle dig that had become increasingly frequent. Corinna had married a brilliant researcher, but somewhere along the way, she'd decided she wanted to be married to an empire builder instead. My patents generated millions in licensing fees, but I worked in a lab, not a corner office. Vintage band t-shirts to work, not Italian suits. I drove a reliable sedan, not a Lamborghini. Most of Quantum Dynamics' revenue streams are built on fairly standard implementations, I said carefully. I'm not sure what unique value proposition they'd bring to a partnership. Corinna's expression hardened. See, this is exactly what I mean. You always find reasons why things won't work, instead of seeing the potential. Alaric built a billion-dollar company from nothing. Maybe you could learn something from him instead of dismissing him. I wanted to explain that I wasn't dismissing anyone, that I'd actually spent considerable time studying quantum dynamics patent filings and found them surprisingly familiar. But Corinna had already returned to her phone, effectively ending the conversation. Over the next several weeks, these coffee meetings became lunch meetings, which became evening strategy sessions at upscale restaurants in downtown Crescent. Corinna would come home with stories about Alaric's latest acquisition, his expansion into European markets, his plans for a new research facility in Silicon Valley. He's offering me a position, she announced one Thursday evening, her eyes bright with excitement. VP of Strategic Partnerships would mean working directly with his executive team helping identify acquisition targets and integration opportunities. About your position at Morrison and Associates? I asked. She'd spent 8 years building her reputation as one of the city's top intellectual property attorneys. This would be different, more dynamic. Alaric says the legal field is too reactive. He wants to be proactive, to shape the future instead of just documenting it. She paused, studying my expression. You don't seem excited for me? The truth was, I wasn't sure what I felt. Pride that my wife was being headhunted by one of the region's most successful companies. Concern that she was being recruited for reasons that had nothing to do with her legal expertise. Suspicion that these strategy sessions involved more than business planning. I want you to be happy, I said finally. But are you sure this is about career advancement? Corinna's face flushed. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Forget I said anything. But I couldn't forget, and neither could she. The distance between us, already significant, became a chasm. She started working later, attending more industry events, spending weekends at executive retreats that seemed to coincide with Alaric's travel schedule. Our conversations became functional exchanges about schedules and finances, punctuated by her increasingly frequent observations about successful people who took risks and thought bigger. The final piece of the puzzle came during what I thought was a romantic dinner at Romano's, the Italian place where we'd celebrated our 5th anniversary. Corinna had suggested it, and I'd hoped it meant she wanted to reconnect. Instead, she spent most of the meal explaining why she'd decided to take the position at Quantum Dynamics. I've been thinking about what I want the next phase of my life to look like, she said, twirling pasta around her fork without eating it. We're both successful in our own ways, but we want different things now. You're content with your research, and your patents, and your quiet life. And that's fine, Kaelen. But I want more. More what? More impact. More excitement. It's more purpose. She set down her fork and looked directly at me. Alaric understands that. He's building something that matters, something that will change the world. And he's invited me to be part of it. The way she said his name. The light in her eyes when she talked about his vision, I finally understood what I'd been watching unfold. This wasn't about career ambition or intellectual stimulation. My wife had fallen in love with the idea of being part of someone else's empire, someone else's legacy. What exactly are you saying, Corinna? She reached across the table and took my hand, her touch feeling more like a farewell than a connection. I'm saying that sometimes people grow in different directions, and maybe it's time we acknowledge that. The text message arrived at 2:47. I'm on a Tuesday night while I was reviewing patent applications in my home office. Corinna had been at another strategic planning session. I'd fallen asleep waiting for her to come home. The notification lit up my phone. Thanks for an incredible evening. Can't wait to show you the penthouse tomorrow. AI stared at the screen, my tired brain taking several seconds to process what I was reading. The message was clearly intended for Corinna, but it had somehow been sent to me instead. A simple mistake in the contacts list, the kind of error that reveals truths we're not supposed to see. My hands were surprisingly steady as I scrolled up through their message thread, a thread I hadn't known existed. Months of communications unfolded. Before me, starting with professional exchanges about market opportunities and evolving into something that made my stomach turn. Meeting you has changed everything. See, I've never felt this alive. Kaelen suspects something. See, soon it won't matter. Once the acquisition is finalized, we can be open about everything. AI set the phone down and walked to our bedroom, where Corinna's side of the bed remained empty. The acquisition. What acquisition? Spent the rest of the night in my office, not sleeping but thinking. Thinking about the late meetings, the weekend retreats, the gradual transformation of my wife from someone who valued stability into someone who craved the spotlight of someone else's success. But mostly thinking about that word, acquisition, when Corinna finally came home at 6:30 a.m. She found me sitting at the kitchen island with a cup of coffee and her phone in front of me. Kaelen, I can explain, she said immediately, her face going pale. Can you? I asked, sliding the phone toward her, because I'm having trouble understanding. How a strategic partnership turned into you planning to leave me for someone who's apparently acquiring something that will make none of this matter. She sat down across from me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd married. The one who used to value honesty above comfort, who'd once told me that she'd rather face difficult truths than live comfortable lies. Comfortable lies. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she said quietly. When I started working with Alaric, it really was about business. But Kaelen, he's building something extraordinary. And being around that kind of ambition, that kind of vision, it made me realize how small my life had become. Small? Yes, small. Her voice grew stronger, more defensive. We have a nice house and a comfortable income and a predictable routine. But where's the passion? Where's the excitement? When's the last time you talked about changing the world instead of just filing another patent application? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I almost smiled at that. If she only knew. What's he acquiring, Corinna? She hesitated, and I could see her calculating what to say, how much truth she could afford to share. There are several opportunities he's exploring. Companies that have developed interesting technologies, but lack the vision or resources to scale them properly. Companies like Nexus Labs, or silence was answer enough. How long has he been planning this? Kaelen, you have to understand how long. She looked down at her hands. 6 months, maybe longer. It's business. Nexus Labs has some valuable assets, but you're never going to maximize their potential working in academic partnerships and limited licensing deals. Alaric can take those technologies global. Those technologies... I set down my coffee cup carefully. You mean my technologies? The neural interface systems I've spent 8 years developing? Sensor arrays that took me through 3 different research positions to perfect? The algorithms that I wrote? Intellectual property belongs to the AM institution where it was developed, she said, slipping into lawyer mode. And institutions can be acquired. There it was. My wife wasn't just leaving me for another man. She was helping him steal my life's work in the process. The strategic partnership she'd been discussing wasn't collaboration. It was reconnaissance. Every dinner conversation where she'd asked about my research, every casual question about patent timelines and licensing agreements, every moment I'd thought she was finally taking interest in my career, she'd been gathering intelligence for someone else. You've been reporting to him, I said. It wasn't a question. I've been consulting. There's a difference. Is there? Corinna stood up, her professional composure returning. Kaelen, I know you're hurt, and I understand that. Ash. But this doesn't have to be acrimonious. Alaric's acquisition offer is extremely generous. You'll retain a consulting role. And there are stock options that could make you wealthy beyond anything you'd achieve staying at Nexus. And you get to be the queen of his empire. I get to be part of something that matters. Looked at her hand, saw a stranger. Someone who'd convinced herself that betrayal was ambition, that theft was vision. That destroying our marriage was actually saving us both from mediocrity. What happens if I say no to the acquisition? Hesitated again, and in that pause, I understood that this conversation was a formality. Alaric Venrose had been planning to acquire my technologies with or without my cooperation. Having my wife smooth the path was just more efficient than hostile takeover tactics. You'll say yes, she said finally. Because the alternative is watching. Quantum dynamics develop competing technologies that make your patents obsolete, and then you'll have nothing. 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 Except me walking out that door to be with someone who isn't afraid of his own potential. She delivered that ultimatum with the confidence of someone who believed she held all the cards. Someone who thought she understood the game being played and her position in it. Someone who had no idea that her husband had spent the sleepless hours since 2:47 a.m., making phone calls, sending encrypted emails, and preparing for a very different kind of morning than she was expecting. You're right, I said, standing up. You should definitely go be with someone who isn't afraid of his potential. Relief flickered across her face. So you'll consider the offer? Oh? I'll do more than consider it. I'm going to make sure Alaric Venrose gets exactly what he deserves. The phone call from my patent attorney came at 8:15 a.m., just as Corinna was gathering her things to leave for what I now knew was a celebration breakfast with her new partner in crime. "Kaelen, I've finished the analysis you requested," Nathan Cross said, his voice tight with urgency. "You need to see this immediately. Can you meet me at my office?" "On my way." Corinna looked up from packing her briefcase. "Everything okay?" "Just some routine patent paperwork," I said, kissing her cheek with the same casual affection I'd shown for 15 years. "Nathan wants to review some licensing agreements." She smiled, probably thinking about how those licensing agreements would soon be Alaric's problem instead of mine. "I'll be late tonight. Another strategy session." "Of course you will." Nathan Cross had been handling my intellectual property portfolio since my graduate school days, back when my first breakthrough in neural interface design had caught the attention of venture capitalists. His office in downtown Crescent Bay occupied the top floor of the Meridian building, with windows that offered a view of Quantum Dynamics' gleaming headquarters 3 blocks away. "Sit down," Nathan said, without preamble, gesturing to the chair across from his mahogany desk. "What I'm about to show you is going to be disturbing." He opened a thick folder and spread out dozens of patent documents, technical specifications, and legal filings. I recognized some of them as my own work, but others were unfamiliar. I spent all night cross-referencing every patent filed by Quantum Dynamics since their incorporation, Nathan began. Then I compared them to your portfolio, looking for potential conflicts or infringement issues that might complicate an acquisition. And there are no conflicts, Kaelen. There can't be conflicts when someone is essentially filing continuation patents on your original work. I leaned forward, studying the documents. "What do you mean?" Nathan pulled out a specific set of papers. "Look at this. Quantum Dynamics Patent 8,742,391. Neural Network Interface for Consumer Applications. Filed 18 months ago. Now look at your original filing from 2019. Adaptive Neural Interface Systems for Human-Computer Integration." As I read through the technical specifications, my blood began to run cold. The core algorithms were identical, not similar, but identical. The sensor configurations I'd spent years perfecting had been reproduced exactly, down to the specific calibration protocols I'd developed through hundreds of hours of testing. "This isn't continuation work," I said slowly. "This is direct copying." Gets worse. Nathan spread out more documents. The smart home integration system that made Quantum Dynamics famous. It's built on your ambient sensor array patents from 2020. The medical monitoring devices that put them on the Fortune 500. Your biometric analysis algorithms from 2021. I stared at the papers, my mind racing. But how? My research was conducted at Nexus Labs under strict confidentiality agreements. The patents are filed under the university's IP protection protocols. Nathan's expression was grim. That's what I thought too, till I started digging into the corporate structure of some of Quantum Dynamics' early investors. He pulled out another set of documents, these ones showing corporate filings and investment records. Meridian Capital Partners was one of Quantum Dynamics' first major investors. They provided the seed funding that allowed Alaric to scale his initial concepts. I've never heard of Meridian Capital. Most people haven't. It's a holding company that manages investments for high-net-worth individuals and family offices. Very discreet, very selective. Nathan highlighted a specific section of the filing. But if you dig deep enough into their limited partnership documents, you'll find something interesting. My eyes scanned the highlighted text, and my world tilted on its axis. Nexus Innovation Labs has been a limited partner in Meridian Capital for 8 years, I read aloud, contributing intellectual property assets in exchange for equity stakes in emerging technology companies. Nathan nodded. Your university has been monetizing faculty research through this investment fund. Every patent you've filed, every breakthrough you've achieved, it's been packaged up and sold to fund other ventures. The room felt like it was spinning. They've been selling my work. Not selling, licensing. Technically, everything was above board. But here's the thing that makes this criminal rather than just unethical. Nathan pulled out the final set of documents. These licensing agreements specifically prohibit the university from disclosing the transactions to the original researchers. and they include a clause that allows the licensees to file their own patents on derivative works without attribution. I was having trouble breathing. 8 years of research, hundreds of patents, innovations that I'd believed were secure under university protection had actually been feeding directly into Alaric Rose's empire. Corinna knew, I said, pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. She's an IP attorney. She would have had to structure these deals. What? Nathan's expression darkened further. It's worse than that, Kaelen. Look at the signature on the original Meridian Capital Agreement. I looked down at the document he was pointing to and felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. There, in familiar handwriting, was my wife's signature dated 3 years ago, right around the time quantum dynamics had started their meteoric rise. She didn't just know, I whispered. She orchestrated it from the beginning. Every patent you filed was immediately evaluated for commercial potential and fast-tracked into the Meridian portfolio. Quantum dynamics wasn't just a beneficiary of this arrangement. They were the primary destination for your technologies. I sat back in my chair trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. My wife hadn't just fallen in love with Alaric. Venrose, the man she'd been building his empire with my innovations for 3 years. Every breakthrough I'd shared with her over dinner. Every late night when I'd explained my latest discovery. Every moment of professional excitement I'd brought home to the person I trusted most. She'd been packaging it up and delivering it to someone else. But here's the thing they didn't count on, Nathan said, and I heard something new in his voice, something that sounded almost like excitement. What? The university's agreement with Meridian Capital contains a standard fraud and misrepresentation clause. If any of the intellectual property was obtained through deceptive practices or undisclosed conflicts of interest, the licensing agreements become null and void. What constitutes a conflict of interest? Nathan smiled for the first time all morning. A university employee using her position to benefit a romantic partner while concealing that relationship from the institution. I felt something shift inside me, like tumblers falling into place in a complex lock. You mean if Corinna was personally involved with the beneficiary of these technology transfers? I mean, if we can prove that your wife was in a romantic relationship with Alaric Venrose while she was structuring deals that gave him access to your patents, then every single licensing agreement becomes legally void. The implications hit me like lightning, which means that quantum dynamics has been built on stolen intellectual property. Every product they've launched, every patent they've filed, every dollar they've earned, that's all based on technologies they had no legal right to use. I thought about Corinna's confidence that morning, her certainty that I had no choice but to accept Alaric's acquisition offer. Her belief that she held all the cards in this game. They have no idea that we know, I said. None. And given that you've been completely shut out of the Meridian arrangement, there's no legal way they could have anticipated this discovery. I stood up and walked to Nathan's window, looking out at the gleaming quantum dynamics tower that had been built with my innovations. At the empire that my wife believed was her ticket to a bigger, more exciting life. What's our next move? I asked. Nathan began gathering the documents. We file for immediate injunctive relief to halt any ongoing use of your patents, we demand. A full forensic audit of quantum dynamics technology stack, and we prepare to watch a billion-dollar empire built on fraud collapse like a house of cards. How long will it take? If we move fast and file everything simultaneously, quantum dynamics could be functionally shut down within 2 weeks. I thought about Corinna, probably sitting in some upscale cafe right now, planning her new life with a man who was about to lose everything, planning to leave me for an empire that existed only because she'd been stealing from me for 3 years. Let's do it, I said. But Nathan, I want to be the one who tells them what's happening. When I checked my watch, in 6 hours, Corinna would come home expecting to find a defeated husband ready to sign away his life's work. Instead, she was going to discover that the man she'd underestimated for so long had been busy dismantling everything she'd helped build. Tonight, I said. I want them to understand exactly who they've been dealing with. At exactly 7:30 p.m., I heard Corinna's key in the lock. I was sitting in our living room with a glass of wine, surrounded by carefully arranged stacks of legal documents, patent filings, and corporate records. The coffee table looked like a war room, which in many ways it was. "Kaelen," she called out, her voice carrying that false brightness she'd perfected over the past few months. "You'll never guess what happened today. Alaric got preliminary approval for the European expansion, and the board is fast-tracking the acquisition timeline." She appeared in the doorway, still glowing with excitement, and stopped short when she saw the paper fortress I'd constructed around myself. "What's all this?" she asked, but something in her tone suggested she already suspected. Said, taking a sip of wine, "You know how I am when I get curious about something. I tend to dig until I find what I'm looking for." Corinna set down her purse and moved closer, her lawyer instincts clearly activated by the formal documents spread across our furniture. I watched her eyes scan the visible headers: Meridian Capital Partnership Agreement, Quantum Dynamics Patent Portfolio, Licensing Revenue Distribution Analysis. "Kaelen, where did you get these?" "The same place you got them, actually." Nathan Cross has been very thorough in his research, though I have to say, some of the signatures were quite familiar. She went completely still. "I don't know what you think you found. I found my life's work." I interrupted, standing up and walking to the window that faced downtown Crescent Bay. 8 years of research and innovation, systematically stolen and repackaged to build someone else's empire. I found licensing agreements that were hidden from me while I was creating the very technologies being sold, and I found my wife's signature authorizing all of it. The silence behind me stretched long enough that I turned around to see Corinna sinking into the armchair across from the coffee table. Her face pale, but her jaw set in the defiant expression I knew meant she was preparing to fight. "It wasn't stealing," she said finally. "Everything was done through proper legal channels. The university has the right to monetize faculty research, and I structured those deals to maximize value for all parties involved. All parties except the actual inventor. You were compensated through your salary and research grants. And if you'd bothered to read the fine print of your employment agreement, you'd know that intellectual property developed using university resources belongs to the institution." I almost smiled at that, even caught red-handed. She was trying to lawyer her way out of this with technicalities and contract language. "You're absolutely right," I said, moving back to the coffee table and picking up a specific folder, which is why I had Nathan examine every detail of those employment agreements and licensing deals. I opened the folder and pulled out a document I'd been saving for this moment. "Did you know that your Meridian Capital Partnership Agreement includes a fraud and misrepresentation clause?" A fascinating reading, really. Especially the part about how any undisclosed conflicts of interest void the entire arrangement. Corinna's eyes widened as she recognized the implications. "Kaelen, when exactly did your relationship with Alaric Venrose begin?" I asked conversationally. "Because according to these documents, you've been structuring deals that benefit Quantum Dynamics for 3 years. But according to your text messages, you've been personally involved with their CEO for at least 6 months, probably longer." Stood up abruptly. "You went through my phone." "Actually, Alaric sent me a very informative message by mistake." Amazing how one little error can unravel such an elaborate scheme. I picked up another document. "I've also been reviewing the patent applications filed by Quantum Dynamics. Remarkable how closely they mirror my original research. Almost like someone had access to detailed technical specifications and development notes." The color was draining from Corinna's face as she began to understand the legal catastrophe I was describing. "Every licensing agreement is void," I continued. "Every patent Quantum Dynamics filed based on my work is about to be challenged. Every product they've launched using stolen intellectual property is going to face immediate injunctive relief." "You can't do this," she whispered. "I can, and I am." I walked over to our home office and returned with a manila envelope. "In fact, I've already done it. These are copies of the legal filings Nathan submitted this afternoon. Quantum Dynamics will receive notification tomorrow morning." I set the envelope on the coffee table next to all the evidence of her betrayal. Alaric Venrose has built his entire empire on technologies he had no legal right to use, obtained through fraudulent licensing agreements structured by someone who was secretly working for him while married to their original inventor. Corinna was shaking her head. "The university will never support this. They've made millions from the Meridian partnership. The university is about to be named as a co-defendant in the largest intellectual property fraud case in recent history. Trust me, they're going to be very motivated to cooperate with my legal team rather than defend licensing agreements that were obtained through your deception. I sat back down and poured myself another glass of wine, feeling calmer than I had in months. But here's my favorite part. Do you remember what you told me this morning about how I'd have nothing if I didn't accept Alaric's acquisition offer? She didn't respond, but I could see her calculating the ramifications of what I'd just revealed. It turns out that when a company's entire product line is built on stolen intellectual property, their stock becomes worthless pretty quickly. And when that company was planning to pay for acquisitions with worthless stock, well, their business model becomes rather problematic. I stood up and walked to the front door, opening it wide. So here's what's going to happen, Corinna. Tomorrow morning, Alaric Van Roos is going to discover that his billion-dollar empire is actually a house of cards built on fraud. His investors are going to panic, his partnerships are going to dissolve, and his stock is going to crater. The man you've been planning to build a future with is about to lose everything he never actually owned in the first place. She stared at me with a mixture of shock and fury. You're destroying people's lives out of spite. I'm protecting my intellectual property from thieves, I corrected. The fact that those thieves happen to include my wife just makes this more personally satisfying. Corinna grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, then stopped and turned back to face me. This isn't over, Kaelen. Alaric has resources, connections, legal teams. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you're up against. I smiled and raised my wine glass in a mock toast. Give Alaric my regards. Tell him Kaelen Dravik says welcome to the real world where you can't build empires on other people's work without consequences. She slammed the door so hard that the windows rattled. I sat back down in my living room, surrounded by the evidence of the biggest betrayal of my life, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete control over my own destiny. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time to watch everything they'd built with my innovations come crashing down. The first call came at 6:42 a.m. I was making coffee in my kitchen. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. Kaelen Dravik speaking. This is Alaric Van Roos. His voice was tight with barely controlled fury. We need to talk. I'm listening, not over the phone. My office, 1 hour. I sipped my coffee slowly. I don't think so. If you have something to say, you can say it now. There was a pause, and when he spoke again, I could hear the effort it took to keep his voice level. You're making a serious mistake. The legal action you've initiated could destroy not just Quantum Dynamics, but dozens of other companies and thousands of jobs. Surely we can reach a reasonable settlement? A settlement? I almost laughed. For what? You stole 8 years of my research and built a billion-dollar company with it. What exactly are you offering to settle for? Full licensing fees, backdated to our first implementation, plus equity stakes in any future developments. Corinna mentioned you might be interested in a more collaborative approach moving forward. The audacity was breathtaking. Even facing legal annihilation, he was trying to frame theft as partnership. Tell me something, Alaric. When you were romancing my wife, did you know she was feeding you my research? Or did you think her access to cutting-edge neural interface technologies was just a happy coincidence? Another pause. Your marriage problems aren't my concern. This is about business. No, this is about fraud and theft. Not the fact that your entire empire is about to collapse because it was built on stolen intellectual property. The line went dead. The second wave came that afternoon. Corinna arrived at my office at Nexus Labs with 2 men in expensive suits, undoubtedly Quantum Dynamics legal team. Kaelen, we need 5 minutes, she said, her professional mask firmly in place. Whatever you want to discuss can go through Nathan Cross. One of the lawyers stepped forward. Mr. Dravik, I'm James Morrison from Crenshaw and Associates. We represent Quantum Dynamics in this matter. Our client is prepared to make you an extremely generous offer to resolve this dispute quietly. How generous? $50 million. plus ongoing royalty payments of 15% on all future revenue from the disputed technologies. I pretended to consider it. And in exchange, you withdraw your legal filings and sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement about the entire matter. Corinna was watching me with desperate hope in her eyes. Kaelen, this is more money than you could make in 10 lifetimes of university research. You could start your own company, build something incredible. The gag order preventing me from ever discussing how you stole my work to begin with. The second lawyer spoke up. Mr. Dravik, you should understand that prolonged litigation could be very expensive for someone on a university salary. Our clients have significant resources and are prepared to defend their interests vigorously. I looked directly at Corinna. Is that a threat? Her face flushed. It's reality. Alaric has connections throughout the tech industry, government contracts, international partnerships. If you insist on pursuing this destructive path, you're going to find yourself isolated and blacklisted. Interesting. I stood up. So first you steal my work, then you offer to pay me a fraction of what it's worth. And when that doesn't work, you threaten to destroy my career unless I stay quiet about the theft. Morrison cleared his throat, so we're simply pointing out the practical considerations. The practical consideration, I interrupted, is that quantum dynamics stock has already dropped 30% since news of the patent challenges broke this morning, and that's just the beginning. I walked to the window overlooking the parking lot, where I could see Alaric Venrose himself sitting in a black Mercedes, probably monitoring this conversation. You know what the really beautiful part is? I turned back to face them. I don't need your money. My patents are worth more than quantum dynamics' entire market cap. And now I'm going to license them to your competitors at rates that will make it impossible for you to compete. Corinna's composure finally cracked. You're doing this to punish me. You're willing to hurt innocent people just to get revenge. I'm doing this to protect intellectual property rights and prevent fraud, the fact that it's going to cost you. The empire you built with stolen technology is just poetic justice. The lawyers exchanged glances. Morrison tried one more approach. Mr. Dravik, perhaps if we could arrange a meeting between you and Mr. Venrose directly. No meetings, no settlements, no negotiations. I opened the door to my office. Tell Alaric that if he wants to discuss anything further, he can do it. Through bankruptcy court, as they filed out, Corinna lingered for a moment. This isn't over, she said quietly. Alaric won't give up everything he's built without a fight. I'm counting on it, I replied, because every move he makes just gives more evidence of willful patent infringement. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. What happened to you? I woke up, I said, and closed the door. 6 months later, I was standing in the conference room of my new company, Dravik Technologies, watching our lead engineer demonstrate the latest neural interface prototype to a group of investors from Tokyo. The technology was revolutionary, a full generation ahead of anything currently on the market and entirely mine. The applications are limitless, I explained to the fascinated investors. Medical rehabilitation, gaming, smart home integration, industrial automation. We're not just licensing individual patents anymore. We're building complete ecosystem solutions. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the empty quantum dynamics building across the street. The corporate logo had been removed 3 months ago when the company finally declared bankruptcy. Alaric Venrose had managed to salvage enough personal assets to avoid complete financial ruin, but his days as a tech visionary were over. The industry had a long memory for fraud. His name was now synonymous with stolen innovation. After the investor meeting, I drove home to my new house in North Shore Heights, a modern architectural marvel that I'd designed myself. With a state-of-the-art laboratory in the basement where I could work on personal projects without university oversight, the mortgage payment was less than what I used to spend on Corinna's shopping trips. My phone buzzed with a message from Nathan Cross. Final settlement approved by the court. Morrison and Associates has agreed to pay your legal fees as part of Corinna's divorce agreement. Is moving to Portland next month? I smiled at that. Corinna's legal career in Crescent Bay had imploded once her role in the patent fraud became public. The state bar was still investigating ethics violations, and most major firms wouldn't touch her. Her dreams of being a power couple with Alaric had evaporated along with his empire. The divorce had been surprisingly straightforward. When someone has helped steal millions of dollars worth of intellectual property from their spouse, they don't have much leverage in asset division negotiations. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Corinna stepped out, looking smaller somehow in a simple black dress instead of her usual designer outfits. "Hello, Kaelen." "Corinna?" I kept my voice neutral. "Nathan said you were leaving town tomorrow. I wanted to see you before I go." She looked up at my new house, then back at me. "I heard about your company, the investor funding, the government contracts. You're going to be incredibly successful." "I already am successful. I just stopped letting other people steal credit for it." She nodded, looking down at her hands. "I know you'll never forgive me for what I did, but I want you to know that I never meant for it to hurt you this much. You meant to steal my life's work and leave me with nothing while you built a new life with the profits? The fact that it backfired doesn't make your intentions any less clear." I thought she stopped, then tried again. "Alaric was offering us both a chance at something bigger. I convinced myself that what we were doing was collaboration, not theft." "You convinced yourself of a lot of things that weren't true." Corinna looked like she wanted to say more, but instead she simply nodded. "I hope you find happiness, Kaelen. Real happiness." "I already have," I said, and realized it was completely true. After she drove away, I walked through my house, my sanctuary built with money I'd earned from my own innovations, decorated according to my own taste. It's filled with the peaceful quiet of a life lived on my own terms. I'd learned something valuable from the whole experience. Sometimes the best thing you can do for people is stop enabling their worst impulses. Corinna and Alaric had built their relationship on shared delusions about success, status, and what they deserved from the world. When I stopped providing the foundation for those delusions, their house of cards collapsed naturally. My phone buzzed. With a text from Dr. Sarah Chen at MIT, one of the researchers who had reached out after news of my independent work spread through academic circles. Collaboration proposal attached. Would love to discuss legitimate partnership opportunities. I smiled and made a mental note to call her tomorrow. It would be refreshing to work with someone who understood the difference between collaboration and theft. Some stories end with revenge. This one ended with something better. Justice, success, and the quiet satisfaction of a life reclaimed. Up next, you got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.